Hello and welcome to Healing Tips from the Heart, Intuition with Helpers, Healers, and Guides. I am your host, Dr. Lori Hops, licensed psychologist, writer, and artist. I've explored mind, body, and spirit related to intuition, or your personal guidance system, since early childhood. Meet my guests who have learned from their personal and professional lives to explore vast realms of knowing, synchronicities, and overcoming challenges. Their stories may inspire you with tools to enhance your daily living and relationships. Hello, everyone, and welcome my special guest for today, Jane McCampbell Stuart. Jane is a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified in EMDR. It's a coach and practitioner of the Akashic Records. She specializes in healing trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. And she works with systems theory, attachment theory, and paying close attention to intergenerational, prenatal, and pre-verbal trauma, which we'll be talking about today. Jane integrates all of these areas, skills, EMDR, tapping, energy psychology, and spiritual approaches, and works online with clients from all over the world. So welcome, Jane. It's so good to see you.
Thank you so much, Laurie. I'm so excited to be here. It's beautiful to meet you on Zoom.
Yes, so just so people know, Jane and I were at the same conference about a month ago, so in May and June of 2025 at ACEP, and we didn't actually meet each other in person, but I did see her post as she was coming to the conference on social media, having to take a multitude of travel options to get to the location. So thank you for traveling so far and wide and being here. And I'm so glad to meet you. And I look forward to when I get to actually meet you in person.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
So today we have so many things we can talk about. And I know that you've done a lot of work with parts, which is a very interesting area that has a lot of people following along and getting so much benefit. And
Yes.
also this very special area that you work with called healing the birth story, which is very intriguing. So why don't we start with parts work, because that's something that maybe people have heard about or maybe don't know as much about. And then we can kind of move into something that's maybe even more new and wonderful in certain ways.
Beautiful.
So
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the things I love to do is to put together ideas that don't normally go together. So I pull things in from all of these different places and then add just a little bit of energy psychology magic. So I might add some tapping, or I might add some scripts, or I might add what I call a little bit of time travel to go and make the processes work more efficiently, more effectively, much quicker, and then they end up being super powerful. And so parts work is one of those experiments where I just thought, hey, I need to speed this up a bit. So let's try adding a little bit of tapping and a little bit of repeat after me, just to guide the process so I can be a bit more directive and see where it goes. And so, of course, in parts work, when we're talking about it in therapy, we're really talking about when we're not fully in alignment with ourselves. So that can be as simple as part of me is really excited, but part of me is also a little bit anxious, or part of me is really disappointed, but part of me is also kind of relieved. When we talk about the brain, so we go back to Plato's theory of the brain, which was that it was divided into three parts. We've got our survival part, we've got our emotional part, we've got our logical, rational part, and this whole idea of which part of the brain are we operating out of right at the moment. And that doesn't actually hold up with current neuroscience, but it's still how we talk about the brain and how we talk about ourselves. Freud talked about the structure of the human psyche. We have the id and the ego, and then the superego trying to get us to behave well. And then more recently, we've got IFS, which has really taken the world by storm because it's such a fun theory and everybody gets really dug into figuring out which part is which, and how they do this work. So my big goal of parts work, anytime I'm doing it, is that we need to be aiming towards integration. So, yeah, it's fun finding out all of those parts and naming them, but the real goal of the work is to actually bring all of them in to the full being, update everybody to who we are now, and make sure that we are acting with integrity, which is a root word of integration, which is acting out of the whole of ourselves rather than one of these split off parts of ourselves. And so, whether we're calling these parts saboteurs in the coaching industry, whether we're calling them exiles or firefighters, whether we're calling them the inner critic, whether we're calling them introjects, all of these different ways of working with parts, really, we're all looking for the same goal, which is to acknowledge them all, recognize that they all came into being for a specific purpose, and are trying to protect us. And then we want to update them to the current time and place and the person that we are now.
Wow, thank you. From Plato to 2025 in less than 5 minutes. Bravo. That's so great. As I'm listening to you talk, so I'm thinking about two different things. One is the novice, and one is someone who's more experienced in energy practices. So for the novice, someone who's new to all of this, I like what you said about how we get divided within ourselves. Like, I really want this, but then I don't want that, or I'm wishing that I could do more of this, but then I hold myself back, or it never seems to work out, or I have my doubts. So we all have these like divisions within us, and some of them are more problematic than others. Some of them just make us interesting as people because we're not all just one flavor. But it's when it gets in the way of living. Is that right? When it becomes a problem?
Exactly. When it's a problem, or when we're inconsistent. Maybe something in us gets triggered. It unconsciously reminds us of something that happened in the past, and then we kind of let our spouse have it. And then we've got a lot of relational repair to do, and it wasn't really the spouse's issue. And so if we can go and find whatever that part or that experience was that is stuck in that experience, and then be able to bring it in and update it, and let you know what, you're X number of years old now, and the year is 2025, and life is very different now. And this is a really beautiful person that we don't want to be screaming at.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
your
So,
child, your
yes,
coworker, your dog, whatever.
exactly. Yeah.
Yourself.
Yes, yourself. Yeah, so inner critics, another part of that. So we try and do something, or we make a mistake, and then we start leveling so much criticism at us, often more criticism at ourselves than we would ever do to somebody else. And so, oh, let's see what that's about, and see if we can update, understand what that part of us is trying to do, and soften it a little bit so that it's working on behalf of the team, rather than going rogue.
Super. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's much clearer. And so I'm also thinking about people who know more about energy psychology or tapping, EFT or TFT or other AIT, other things that use this meridians, the channels of energy throughout the body. And we hold, tap, or massage the endpoints of these meridians along the torso, base, and sometimes hands or legs, depending upon the school you're using. And I have other videos that talk more in depth about what that is. And there's links in the program notes about if you're new to that field, if you want to read blogs and other links. So we have that. But one of the things that we do in some of these systems is we set up these contrast statements, which I
Right.
see would work perfectly with internal, what is it? Internal.
Dick Schwartz, who came up with IFS, actually wrote the textbook for family therapists that they would use to study for the exam. So it did come out of family systems. And he thought, oh, but as well as this family system outside, we also have this whole system inside,
I
and
see.
the whole system inside interacts with the system inside of other people. So
And
yeah, it is. That's
my
where the family
naivete and
comes
lack of
from.
experience is showing, but it's a good question
Not
though.
at all. No, it's it's
So,
just where.
so in the tapping thing, so you say something like, even though I'm excited to be here, I'm also thinking about things that I could be doing instead, for example. And so that's a contrast between two
Right.
different aspects of reality. And what you're trying to do is make room for all of it. Like I
Hmm.
accept myself as I am, I accept things as they are, I'm in the flow of life, or I know I'll figure it out somehow, I always do. So you have this like contrast and then the acceptance of it. So I can see where these two systems would just match up very seamlessly, at least from the way you described it in a summary way.
Right, right. So I'm a little bit more directive in the sense that I have the client repeat after me and follow me on the tapping. And by doing that, I'm keeping them really embodied because I don't want them going off and dissociating. And sometimes when we're talking to some of these parts, they might be a bit dissociated or they're trying to protect us from something that is really painful that they don't want to go to. So I really want that client totally in the body, totally with me, totally attuned. So I have them follow me on the tapping points, and I do TFT points. Actually, I learned TFT
Okay.
before I learned EFT, so my points are slightly different. And then I just have them repeat after me. And then I say, if it's true for you, that's great. And if it's not, you get to change it. Um, and then I lead them through a script where I am welcoming all the parts of them. And then acknowledging that there are different parts there. And some of them thought they were the only part, and they didn't realize there's a whole team of parts.
Yeah.
Some of them didn't realize that we're the age that we're at now and what life is like now. And some of them are actually very happy with their responses and managing whatever they're doing. And they really don't want the current self to come in. And they're worried that the current self is going to come in and screw things up.
Yeah.
And so, how do we speak to all of those, bring them all online, and acknowledge that all of them are doing the best they can, and that actually we all have the same goal, which is to keep the team safe?
Beautiful. Thank you for that. It's so interesting. Yeah. I appreciate having a lesson directly from you about this because I've heard about internal family systems and I was brought up in psychology in family systems and cognitive behavioral at the same time in the 1980s, a long time ago. And family systems was criticized back then because it wasn't empirically driven at the time, and it was very much more maybe art than science. A lot of the innovators at the time were highly creative, intuitive individuals, and
Right.
if you followed their school and tried to emulate what they were doing, maybe you could get some success. There was theory, of course, but this
Yeah.
is much more, this is something that has more grounding to it and structure, it sounds like.
Right. Right.
And so anyway, it's kind of nice to see the development of the field over
But
time.
I'd also just say that family therapy and family systems theory comes out of sociology, whereas psychology comes out of the medical model. So the medical model is much more about what can we research, how can we assess these results, as opposed to looking at the relational piece. And so the main difference with somebody working from a family therapy perspective is not the number of people in the room. It's that we look for the locus of the issue within the relational dynamic rather than within the person.
Yeah.
So it just makes it a little bit trickier to try and nail that down. And yes, so can be a little bit more of an art and way harder to actually measure in terms of looking at the success versus working with CBT, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Well, so is this related to healing the birth story? I mean, where did that work come out of? It's such an intriguing title.
Yeah, so it's related in the sense that I take things that I've learned and then add some energy psychology to make them work in a different way. So yeah, healing the birth story came from Many different places. So I first learned about working with prenatal trauma through EMDR, and there's a lovely EMDR protocol for learning about what our body and our system is holding about the information from before we were born. And it's a protocol that I loved and used for many years, but it takes a long time to do. And anytime you have a protocol in a therapy setting that takes a long time, invariably life gets in the way or something else happens, and then you never actually get to the end of the work.
Mhm.
And so what I wanted to do was, again, to be able to make it work a little more quickly so that we could actually get to the end and really understand our story. So many of us come into life with this belief that we aren't lovable, that we weren't wanted, or that we don't deserve to be here.
Mm.
And so I turned that on its head and said, maybe it's not that you're unlovable, that you weren't wanted, or that you don't deserve to be here. Maybe you just arrived in the middle of a crap show.
Called Planet Earth.
And so what we do is, or what I do is I take the client back in time and space as they are now to go and observe the occasion of their birth. We want to see who's there. We want to see who's in the room. We want to see what the mood is in the room. We want to see who is feeling what, who's coping with what else is going on in life at the same time.
Mhm.
And then we want to offer some resourcing to our little prenate self, to the birth mother, and then to any of the other members of the family system who are there or who need it, or who want to come in. And so sometimes ancestors come in, sometimes people who've passed come in, and it's incredibly beautiful and integrative. So again, that's a link with the parts work. It's linking that piece of the story and the part of ourselves, the prenate, with the part of ourselves in the family system, and doing some healing work with all of them.
Wow, that is beautiful, courageous work, important work. There's not that many people I've met in my career who work this way.
Wow.
Willem Lammers works with preconception
Mhm.
and kind of what happens at the moment of conception and where you are on your journey and takes it through the birth experience and beyond. But that's an advanced protocol that he works with.
Right. Yeah.
And then I think it was Anne McCarthy. She worked with birth trauma
Mhm.
and consciousness within the womb. So yeah, and working with babies as soon as they're born and healing stuff, and there's other people as well that I'm not naming, but there's not that many. There's not that many people that work with children, let
Right.
alone this earlier area. So thank you for that. And I'm also thinking about how it can become very complicated in terms of family systems when you have, let's say, an adoption,
Mhm.
or you have family trauma that's going on, or whether it's a quote wanted or unquote unwanted birth.
Yeah, exactly.
Or people who are born in dire circumstances, like during war or
Yep.
other things like that. So, I mean, not everyone has this like glowy, warm, loving, and even then, like there's physical traumas that happen. There's emergencies. There's all the doubts and worries that people have, especially if
Yeah.
they're new to parenting or they're an older parent. So,
Right.
I mean, I don't mean to be, my mind is just like kind of flooded right now with all of the like different.
All of the permutations, and it's beautiful to work with all of them. Absolutely beautiful. So some people come to me when they're pregnant themselves and they want to clear anything that they might be carrying from the generations that isn't going to be helpful to their new little ones. So we go back and do their own birth story so that they can then be able to give a new story to the baby they're carrying. So and then you mentioned adoption. So adoption is so traumatic for everybody concerned, even in the most carefully, delicately, intentionally handled circumstances. It is so traumatic for the birth mother to make the decision to go through with the pregnancy and then give up the baby. It is so traumatic for the baby, for every single thing they've ever known to suddenly be gone, and somebody else to be in their place, and that that can set up a lot of issues that show up in later life around relationship, around acceptance, around fear of rejection, around fear of being passed on or given away. And then for the adoptive parents as well, there's often so much of story and so much loss behind why they're adopting in the first place. And then with the system, how it works, particularly in the States, it's not all said and done once they take the baby home. There's a long process before that baby is actually officially legally theirs, during which time anything can happen and that baby can be taken away again. So the anxiety for all of the people concerned, and it's just the most sacred work, actually, to go back and take care of all of them, the birth mum, and the circumstances around the conception, the prenate itself, the adoptive parents, everybody in that broader system. Really, really beautiful work and transforming for somebody with one of those stories.
Yeah, thank you. I see how you're affected emotionally, and that this is really feels like to me like your life's mission to be doing this kind of very special sacred work.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you for that. Yeah, I like that you said the way it's set up in the States, because there's other times and places where a lot of these levels of trauma did not exist.
Right.
When we lived more communally
Yeah.
and in societies where there weren't such distinct lines between my family, your family, and the rest,
Mhm.
it wasn't seen as so bad. It wasn't seen as a shameful thing, and it wasn't a permanent thing to be, quote, removed. And
Right.
so it could be that, let's say, for whatever circumstances, the birth mother couldn't be available. She was young or sick or had to leave or whatever. The family takes over. And so, or the near or the friends.
Yeah.
And there's more fluidity so that the child is raised by more than one person, even
Exactly.
in a later adoption,
Yeah.
quote unquote adoption. And it's family. You live with this one here and that one there. And so there isn't the extreme cutoff
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that loss and the trauma. And so I'd like to at least speak to that and
Mhm.
know that this is not a universal experience.
Exactly. Exactly. That's so yeah, just so incredibly true. And I see again, coming back to the States, even with mothers who have an open adoption, just the pain of that, and that they go through every year, and they still get to see the kid, they're still in relationship, but just the pain of that loss, even when they do it in what is supposed to be, a really admirable and intentional way. Ah, so any resourcing that I can do for any of those people involved, and particularly with the child that was adopted, just allowing them to have the fuller picture or the fuller context of everybody's story, so that we can hold everybody's story with compassion, and that everybody involved with this was honestly doing the very best that they could.
Yeah, that's so good. I love it. What I have found though, for people who are very traumatized, is they don't start off with the room to be
Yeah,
able to see everyone's perspective because they're in so much pain themselves. And so
exactly.
there's probably a lot of work that has to be done first to make that
Yeah.
available.
So I don't usually advise, if somebody's not done any work on themselves before, I don't usually advise that they go straight in with a healing the birth story session, just because. And with EMDR, we were always taught to work on a narrative memory before you go to a memory that's only implicit, just because you kind of need to figure out, oh, this is how my body communicates to me. This is how I know how to access stuff that is maybe held in my implicit memory, as opposed to a memory that I have words to be able to put around. So yeah, for all of those reasons, it's usually helpful if somebody's done some level of work first before we take them back to be able to do this process. And it's a deeply sacred process. And it's also really adaptable for wherever they are in their worldview. So for some people, it can be a deeply spiritual process. So they might be recognizing that actually their soul is having second thoughts rather at the last minute and isn't sure they want to come in. And so then how do they go and speak to the soul and say, actually, it's going to be okay? I've had people who have suddenly been thinking, okay, I'm about to lose my connection to source, which is a whole other issue of abandonment. And then so being able to work with them on that piece. And then there are just other life pieces, like, who didn't get to come and be in the room at the time of the birth, or who may be passed right before the birth. And I don't want the prenate or the child that we're working with to feel that they have to take responsibility for their parent. So part of what I wanted to do is to bring in, say, okay, who did your mom need? Who would your mom ideally have had to provide support? So we then bring in this whole support network for the adults in the room to free up that responsibility from the child, so that then everybody is held, and everybody is supported in a fully systemic way.
How beautiful. Yeah, I'm thinking about some of the work I've done on my own birth story and things that were going on in the globe,
Mhm.
politically at the time of my birth, and how that affected actually some decisions that were made. So, which
Right.
I wasn't aware of all of that, because,
Yeah.
sometimes you just don't really study the history of exactly when you were born, because it's not part of, as you
Exactly.
said, your narrative. It's not
Yeah.
part of once you had language. You don't usually go back to like, what was going on in the world then?
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's kind of interesting. The other thing I thought about is the support personnel in the room. They're
Yeah.
having their own experience, like especially.
Exactly, they are. Yeah. And so we will do work with them sometimes. We'll sort of say, okay, you need to take a break and we'll bring you a sandwich, or, uh, just show a little bit of compassion to somebody that's been working a 12-hour shift and is absolutely exhausted.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, absolutely. We do that piece too. And I always say we just want to tweak, because we don't want a back to the future problem where we change it so much that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Just want to sort of offer these little tweaks just to really soften the energy, and just change the emotion associated with it for everybody that's there. One of my most powerful, incredible stories, and I'm going to tear up here again on this one. This was a woman who came to me. She was in her late 60s, and she'd struggled with depression for a lot of her life. And when I worked on her birth story, it transpired that her mother had contracted polio when she was pregnant with my client,
Mm.
and they had spent the pregnancy in an iron lung.
Oh,
And mum was taken out of the iron lung to give birth and then died shortly after. And so the client then was passed through a succession of foster homes, and had grown up with this idea that she wasn't loved, wasn't wanted. And obviously, one of those foster mothers had done a really good job because the client herself was able to be a great mom. But just in terms of her own worth and value, it was just so distressing. And when went back to this experience, she was able to get in touch with that period that she spent, just her and mom, just together in the iron lung, and the amount of intentionality that her mum had towards her, the prayers that she had for her, the desires that she had for her, and just all of that incredible love during that precious time. And it completely transformed her relationship with herself, and with other family members, to be able to see the greater system. So it's
oh,
really work.
oh, what a beautiful story, and how poignant and tragic,
Yeah,
and devote, and it's a story of devotion.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Oh, how sad that her mom passed, but what a unique way of being in the world, where it makes sense that we translate it however we do for our own survival, but to be able to go back and rework it and understand it from a different perspective, it's really, I think it's holy work.
Yeah, it is so sacred. It's unbelievably sacred just to be able to, yeah, just to hold the whole system and just look at all of the stresses that everybody was under. One of the things I invite clients to do when they do it, I just say, okay, as you look at this person in the room, so maybe it's dad, dads get short shrift in the labor room, they're kind of in the way and they don't know what to do. They're often sent out. But
Right.
they're holding all of this responsibility of, oh, I got to provide for this family. I've got to do all these things. And look, my wife's in pain and I did this to her. What do I do? And so, so often it's this work of just saying, okay, what can we acknowledge the men for, and who can we bring in to really give the support to the men
Yeah.
in the room? And then, what can we acknowledge the grandparents for? And, who can we bring in who is willing to celebrate the birth of this baby? And then the process kind of closes where I say, okay, we're going to bring everybody in the room and we're going to say their job is to be the welcoming committee for this child coming in. And so is everybody on the same page with that? Does anybody need anything before they can fully come in and welcome this child into being? And then once everybody's on the same page and everybody's excited, as they should be when a new life is coming into the world, then we can go. Then we'll birth the baby.
Oh, love it. Yeah, I was even thinking about other circumstances like same gender, or, it's not a father necessarily, or maybe there's two dads or two moms, or
Yeah,
maybe they used in vitro or surrogate. So there's
yeah,
just so many ways that we create birth now and create life
exactly.
that was not as common maybe
Right,
years ago.
right.
And so it becomes, and you wouldn't have as many of those stories currently with adults because it wasn't the case
Because
60
it
years
wasn't,
ago
yep,
or
it's
40 years
definitely
ago.
not.
But in the future, I can see, I mean, I don't know if you thought about or you've written books, but I could see you writing a book about this that would be so
Yeah, so
interesting.
bring everybody in, everybody who's got a piece of this, and that's what's just so fantastic. So
Yeah.
yeah, so the surrogates, the donors, the
Yeah.
everybody, this whole extended system. Where it does come up now, actually, so is so with Ancestry.com, suddenly people are finding, oh, guess what? This wasn't my birth dad.
Ah.
And so doing that kind of work and then say, okay, so let's actually bring in the bio dad, whether they knew you or knew about this or not, and then let's bring up the dad that raised you,
Yeah.
all of these other relatives that might have been involved, and yeah, just bring everybody in and all of their stories, all of their perspective, and offer that compassion to
Yeah.
everybody who's in the system, knowing that the DNA is living on and that we're all able to impact the world because of this DNA living on through this child coming into the world.
Right. So we're coming to the end of the time together today, but I did have another thought that wasn't quite as cheerful that I
Oh,
wanted to make sure I spoke about. And that's, of course, not all conceptions come from a place of love.
great.
And that we have a lot of stories around the world of forced
Yeah.
situations and also ancestry that is representative of things like enslavement and rape and so on. So that's a delicate way. It may be that maybe I don't want that part of my life to be welcoming
Right.
me at my birth. You know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
yeah. Can you
Yeah.
speak to that a little bit? I think that that might actually help some people if they hear about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if we don't want them to be present at the birth, we don't need to bring them in. Absolutely not. That kind of situation would be recognizing just the sadness, but also just what they might be unintentionally carrying in the narrative about themselves that really belongs to whoever perpetrated the violence. And then, so is there a way that we can actually give that back to that person rather than having this necessarily be about me and about who I am? So this is probably a story where we talked about wanting to do other trauma work before we actually get to doing the birth work. So this is probably something where I would be doing that identity work in a separate session as pre-work before we go in and do the birth story work, because you're exactly right. Do we really want them coming in the room? Are we really ready to be able to offer compassion to them? Probably not. That would be really the final stage of the process, I think, after a lot of other deep trauma work. And yeah, deep identity work about, okay, what does it mean that this is my identity in the world, or this is how I came into being, and what does that say about my worldview, about who my birth parents ended up being.
Yeah. And like you said, it's about the system. So sometimes it's not even just about an individual. It could be about other circumstances like colonialization and slavery and war, what people are forced to do in extreme situations, or if there's a cult or something like that. So sometimes it goes even beyond the individual.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you for addressing that. It's a shadow side to all of this, but I think it's important.
So important, so unbelievably important. Yeah. And again, the more that we can own the story, integrate it, and recognize what does that mean for me, and how am I choosing to live my life, even though the circumstances that I came in were not ideal. Just such beautiful, holy, integrative work.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share before we say goodbye for today?
No, just I do offer the birth story session, so if anybody's curious, I love to do it. Some of my favorite work to do, and always excited to have more case studies to be able to share. So
thank you, and thank you for teaching about this material.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful to have it. Well, delightful conversation with you, and I look forward to more contact in the future.
Laurie, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. If you want to learn more, you can visit my website for podcast and resources at hopshealingtips.com. You can also like, share, and subscribe to this channel. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and is not providing healthcare advice. Please seek guidance from your professional healthcare team should you need assistance.